What is up, everybody? My name is James DeFiore, and this is Blackballed. There have been a couple of guests on my show in the past who have had an extremist sort of origin story and have decided that they wanted to turn their back on the seed that sort of helped them identify who they were as a person and sort of turn the page on that and become kind of the complete opposite of what they were when they were still engaged in, I guess, hatred would be the best way to put it. And today, and this, I love it when this happens. This has happened probably with a half dozen guests out of the 150 something episodes that I've done with Blackballed, where I'll be on a random Twitter thread and someone will just post, "Hey James, you should look into having this guy on the show." And 9 times out of 10, when that happens, I'll contact that person and book them for that day. And that is the case with my guest today. I read the article that someone had sent me. It's from the Tampa Bay Times. The headline says, former Florida white nationalist reckons with his past in America's present. And it was a really interesting article. It was a warts and all sort of article describing what this person was like beforehand and what they're trying to do with their life right now. And his name is Scott Ernest. Scott, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. It was a total shot in the dark, and it was a last-minute request, so I appreciate the time.
It's my pleasure. I'm not the best public speaker in the world or anything like that, but if I can help people with what I have to say, then I'm always willing to say it.
If you can just sort of raise your voice a little bit when you talk, that'd be kind of better, because I am having trouble kind of hearing what you're saying. The volume is just a little low, but we'll deal with that as it comes. But so I read the article. I thought the article was really interesting because it didn't pull any punches. So can you give me an idea? There's a picture of you in the article that I haven't that I didn't load, but and it's you're holding a gun and you kind of look like a little bit angry and everything. And I was wondering if you could sort of go back to how old you were when you sort of first started posting on Stormfront and sort of acting as almost like a recruiter of hate, and just bring me back to that so that we can sort of set up your redemption story, if you will.
Well, the way I ended up first getting involved in Stormfront at all was just one night. It was 2004, around December, maybe even November, and I was just searching the web, and I came across a blog where it was a person who was attacking 2 12-year-old girls, and those girls they're known for Prussian blue, Lynx Lamb Gaty, and I'd never seen that sort of thing before, so I actually contacted the authorities. The authorities kind of shrugged it off, but they recommended I let the parents know. So I contacted their parents, and that their mother turned out to be April Gaty, who is a very well-known white nationalist. And I ended up, talking to them and getting to know them. And in my mind, especially at first, I felt, well, these people aren't as bad as people say they are. And the rabbit hole just went from there. It was recommended that I join Stormfront, so I did right after. And from there, it's easy to start. You start meeting these people. They don't seem that bad while you're talking to them, and you start kind of picking up parts of their ideology. And eventually, over time, I ended up a Stormfront moderator. Facilitator technically. I was a moderator, but I didn't have the ability to ban anybody. My job was to create
how do you get banned from Stormfront?
Uh, Back in the day, they used to have rules against being, violence, any sort of promotion of violence or any sort of, even if you had a swastika in your avatar, or if you had, say, 1488 in your username, you could get banned for that if you didn't remove it
Hmm.
when they asked. Or if you said something, one of the main rules was if you said anything that was against the law of any, basically any white nation, as they would say. And so, yeah, people would get banned. When I became a mod, a lot of them blamed me for that, even though I didn't have the ability to ban anybody.
Hmm.
Uh, but so I became a Stormfront moderator. I also ended up moving up to Montana, which was where April was, and I started recruiting for a group called Pioneer Little Europe Kalispell in northwest Montana. And I became fairly well known for that. And eventually, when you start doing things like moderating those type of websites, and you start recruiting for a hate group like that, and you meet the worst of the worst people, and you yourself are trying to not be the worst of the worst, it's pretty easy to then just start getting disgusted with yourself and the path that you're on and the people that you're around, and
Did you
we went from
find
there.
that was most of your sort of vitriolic behavior in the online world, or did you go to protests or anything like that? Were you at any Proud Boy protests or anything? Or
I did my best to not be very vitriolic. I was not active protesting. I went with when it came to the PLE, for example. I tended to be like, "Come here, we're gonna go have fun. We're gonna go hiking in Glacier National Park as a group. We're gonna go to these festivals as a group." Uh, there were people that would come to the PLE just to do things like protest when things happen in the area, but I tended to avoid that. I tended to avoid recruiting people like that. But I'm not saying that I was better than any of them, because what I did really well was normalized it. I could go around Montana and talk to anybody about white nationalist topics, and generally, I was the way I was. I didn't really get much pushback, and so I normalized things. So I wouldn't have been ever been one of the ones that would go say protest a drag show or something like that. That wouldn't have been my style, I guess you would say.
okay, it was interesting when I read in the article that and the part that you just mentioned about those two little girls. I remember that story. I remember um, Prussian Blue. That's what they were called, right?
That sounds
And they would I don't remember the names of the songs, but it was like, Hitler is my daddy, that kind of stuff. Like it was pretty intense stuff. And I remember thinking to myself at the time that it was almost like it was borderline child abuse to sort of allow kids to sort of blossom in a sort of garden of hatred like that. Like it wasn't like they were dog whistling their lyrics. It was straight up racism, wasn't it?
it was. It absolutely was. And it was something that the girls themselves got sick of and eventually, quit. And, they left the movement before I did. Uh, their younger daughter or their younger sister uh, was actually never even raised like that. Uh, for whatever flaws that April has, she did by and large end up letting her kids decide for themselves who they wanted to be and how they wanted to be. A lot of people would never give April or even me credit for things, but she deserves some credit for that. She could have very well taken the route that a lot of parents do and say, "No, this is what you're going to do. You're not going to go to this public school and hang out with those people." You know, she let them eventually go and be who they wanted to be. So,
Um, are they dating rappers now? Because that would be kind of cool.
the last I heard, no, they're dating. You know, one of them just had another kid, and they're doing well from the last I heard. Uh, I talk to April occasionally still. She knows my path now and everything like that. She pretty much accepts it. I think she pretty much ignores it whenever she talks to me, but
Yeah.
because I was a friend of the family so long, she tolerates it.
I find it. This is what I find interesting. Okay, there are a lot of people that believe that the best way to go about dealing with people who sort of practice hate in society is to point at them and yell at the top of their lungs, Nazi, and this and that. And while I understand the frustration and the emotion behind dealing with people who traffic in hate like that, there really isn't. That isn't a solution to solve the actual problem of hatred, is it?
My position on this is complicated. Uh, yes, it sometimes doesn't help, and it does when you got somebody like me that, I one of the things that I try to do is I try to help people exit that life, and it can make my job harder to do with that. It can also make it harder for those of us that have left. Uh, you know, I've never experienced it myself because whatever reason, uh, no, very rarely have I had much pushback. But others that have left the movement, will have sometimes had pushback. You were what you were, and we're gonna always hate you, and this and that like that. And he, so it doesn't sometimes help. That being said, most people that are in the movement are not likely to exit, and calling out their behavior and their beliefs is something that I do approve of. I don't. I think there should be consequences for actions. I do believe in even deplatforming. I don't believe in deplatforming necessarily everybody, but I do believe in deplatforming the sort of gateways. My degree that I got in the last 5 years is in public health, and my specialty is infection control. And when you get down to it, hate, white nationalism, Christian nationalism, all of them, uh, they're an infection. They're like a very addictive. Uh, it's like an addictive cult that spreads like an infection. You have the vectors that go out from the reservoirs and spreads the infection among the populace. So what's one way you stop that? Mosquito is a vector. So you get rid of the mosquitoes, you know,
Yeah.
and that means you don't necessarily have to go after everybody else, but you get rid of those mosquitoes that are spreading it. So my view, especially on deplatforming and calling people out, is pretty complicated.
What is your definition of deplatforming?
Uh, from platforms like from Twitter or stuff. If somebody says something that is spreading those ideologies, I do believe that it should be something that can be squashed by whatever company doesn't want to be associated with it. The government, I would oppose squashing it, but freedom of association is something I believe in. I am by and large a libertarian. And as a libertarian, I wouldn't want to be forced to, necessarily host somebody on a website or that I own that I don't want to be associated with. That sort of thing. But again, it's complicated. I don't believe in everybody having to be deplatformed. But if somebody's got a large enough audience and they're spreading really dangerous ideas and really dangerous, not even not dangerous ideas, but actually spreading things that are actually dangerous,
Right.
that are actually harming lives. uh, I could bring up examples, but I don't know whether this is the best place to do that. But there are
Oh,
definitely
just give
people
me
out there that
just to let you know, just if I can interject for a second. I have the only rule that I have as far as my podcast goes is that everyone just speaks freely.
I
I don't consider it might surprise you, it might not surprise you to know that even though I just announced that you were going to be on the show about an hour and a half ago or 2 hours ago, whenever that was, um, I've already gotten two emails saying, why are you platforming this former white
uh,
nationalist? And how do you know he's a former white nationalist? And my response to these people is always the same thing: please fuck off, because I'm strongly in the camp of I don't consider what I'm doing platforming. I consider what I'm doing interviewing. And we used to interview terrorists and receive Pulitzers for interviewing terrorists. I don't consider you a terrorist, but I consider your story compelling enough for me to have you on the show. And I would rather hear from you than
Oh,
say that you're not allowed on the show. So you can talk about anything you want and use any example you want, please.
and I do agree. I mean, I've seen some of your prior guests, and obviously some of them are not exactly my favorite type of people. Very
Can you give me an
close to what I
example?
used to be. Megan,
Megan
who
Murphy.
yeah. But what I was going to say was Matt Walsh and lives at TikTok. They've actually caused actual harm and stuff like that. So people like them, I do believe, should be able to be deplatformed from social media or any place where they can keep causing that type of harm. Now, that's not to say for Ben Shapiro, I wouldn't say deplatform someone like Ben Shapiro, because while I would consider him a gateway into far right extremism, that there's less of an issue with someone like Ben Shapiro than somebody causing real harm like Matt Walsh. So that's my take. Like I said, it's complicated.
See, Matt Walsh is one of those guys. He does go too far. I thought, but I think what he does is he spoils his own argument by going too far. And just to sort of like pick at that scab for a second. I don't think that gender theory is a closed debate where everything's been settled and that's it. And that doesn't mean. And here's the problem with certain debate topics. Just me saying that, a whole bunch of people just went like this: oh, transphobe, without even actually hearing what I mean. And the problem that I have with some of these debates is that we've taken the N-word rule, which I think is a good rule, which is that only black people should be able to use the N-word, and it doesn't make sense for anybody else to use it. I agree with that. I think that society has organically come to the conclusion that that is a fucking horrendous, egregious thing to call somebody, and that if you are a black person, you have a pass to use it in any way that you want because you own it. And taking ownership of a word that used to be branded on you without your consent, to me, is a success story in how our society evolves. But people have taken the principle of the certainty of that N-word rule and have pasted it onto these other subjects. And I think it's causing a lot of issues. And I'll just give you a quick example because I think we probably differ on this. I don't agree with Megan Murphy saying that trans people don't exist. I just don't agree with that. But I don't also agree with the idea that there are dozens of genders, and I don't agree with the idea that that self ID doesn't have negative ancillary impacts on society. Now, we are so all or nothing these days that it feels like me just saying that people will not listen to any of the nuance that I just tried to give it, and they will just be like transphobe. And I think that is a symptom of us placing the N-word rule, the certainty of that N-word rule, onto things like gender theory. What would you say to that?
Well, what I can say is I don't think just disagreeing should get somebody deplatformed. But when you have Matt Walsh and Libs of TikTok causing things like bomb threats and stuff, that's where the problem lies for me. Uh, there's a big difference between talk, and talking and having the people that follow you do based on your talk. You know, nothing you're saying is causing anybody to threaten to harm anybody. Nothing Megan Murphy even says is out there trying to cause people harm. So something like that. But some of these people that are actively trying to cause harm are people that should be deplatformed. Another example I'll use is Andrew England, who recently came back to Twitter. He's somebody who has actively tried to cause harm. And I don't say this as somebody that has obviously run into England and had the pleasure of listening to him cry on the phone. I say this as somebody that understands the harm that can cause from allowing stochastic terrorism. I was around terrorists. I've known mass murderers. I was a Facebook friend with Anders Breivik. I know how these things go. It's so there's a
You were
big
Facebook
difference
friends
for
with
me.
the dude that killed what was it, 96 people or whatever it was?
Yeah, when I knew him, this was before that happened. He had a, Facebook account under the name Andrew Berwick, which is the anglicized version of his name. I when
Okay.
he actually did uh, his mass murder, that's when I figured out who that was. So
Yeah,
uh,
and you actually, I believe this was from the Tampa Bay Times article, I think, or maybe it was a Twitter thread I saw you in. But either way, you had a moment. You said, I think it was when you were on Stormfront, where someone was like, "He's my hero because he killed commies," and you were like, "Ugh."
I mean, it was not just him. It was a lot of people. When I was a moderator, the things that I saw people support, that uh, Stormfront at the time tried to keep things clean so that they could hide the worst excesses of the white nationalist movement. And I got to see everything before they got banned. Plus, when I was recruiting people for the PLE, one of the questions I would always ask, especially after uh, Breivik, was, do you support what Breivik did? And people would, every single time, they would tell me, uh, he was killing commies. I would be like, he was killing children. Even assuming they were commies, children can grow out of whatever. It's not like them being a commie at, 12 or 13 or 14 that they're going to be a communist their entire life. You know, so I would push back on that, and that was a constant occurrence, and that's one of the things that led me to eventually, uh, that and knowing so many mass murderers is what eventually led me to disengage from the movement. I didn't, and when I left, I didn't change immediately. I wanted to just leave the movement, be quiet, and just live my life. And then, of course, Andrew Anglin did his stupid little whitefish troll storm, where he was attacking the Gersh family in Whitefish, Montana. And he one of the things he did was he made a page about their 12-year-old kid, and I objected to that. So I contacted Cloudflare to try to get that particular page down, and Cloudflare gave Andrew Anglin my personal information, said, "You guys duke it out." And so I ended up getting that, like I said, call from Andrew where he was crying on the phone. Why are you trying to get my page taken down? I'm making my millions and billions of followers after you. It's like, do it. I was involved in the white nationalist movement for 11 years by that time. I earned any anger from people that would happen. So it's like, do it. And
Yeah.
he did, and I got about, I'd say, 12 to 15 whiny little emails. That's about it. Now, that's not to say that there weren't people that got worse than me in that. The Gersh family still gets hate mail from white nationalists, but it
You know
didn't
what?
really last very long for me.
What's interesting is that because I've been writing for about 20 years as a freelance writer, and I guess my shtick or uh, my my sort of identity as a writer has been I really don't like the left or right boxes, and I try to do everything that I can to not be branded as either. And what ends up happening is that you write one article on Monday and the left hates you, and then you write an article on Wednesday and the right hates you. And I kind of like it like that because I think that we should be more nuanced, anyways. But I've only really received death threats from the left. No matter how many times I pissed off the right, which is a lot, all of my death threats come from the left, which is
Yeah.
weird because
See,
I know
see,
that the
I'm the
violence.
opposite.
What's that?
I'm the opposite. I was
Yeah.
even getting death threats from the right when I was on the right. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I
uh,
know. And I'm not trying to suggest that the left is more violent. I just think it's interesting that I
yeah,
think sometimes when you are seen, like I was writing for Huffington Post at the time, which is obviously seen as a progressive publication. So I think that when you are part of an ecosystem that sort of waves a flag for one ideology or the other, and you betray that ideology, that the blowback is worse than if you are a person that's technically on the left and you criticize the right. I think the right wingers just, or the far right people, I think probably just expect that from you, so they don't get as like worked up about it. But when you are seen to be betraying your own people, I think that's when they really get violent, no matter if it's the left or the right.
yeah. I try to, I tend to be a little bit. I'm still right wing in some ways. And I also have a progressive streak that's been increasing. But in general, I'm still very center, even center right in some ways. But right now, because of the situation with right wing extremism just going batshit crazy right now, I definitely do tend to side with the left far more than the right. And that's not to say that there aren't some problems with the left. The organization I co-founded, Hands of Air. My co-founder is very much somebody that's of the opinion that focusing too much on the right is not going to do anybody any good. And I don't disagree with Vicky, my co-founder, at all. But I tend to focus a little bit more on the right because that's what I used to be. So when I
Can
try to fight it, that's what I try to fight. Yeah.
can you give me the sort of the tipping point of when you decided, okay, that's it. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not a white nationalist anymore. Was it gradual, or was there a moment where you're like, fuck this?
It was gradual, but the very end was pretty abrupt. So I mentioned Anders Breivik. Anders Breivik was kind of the first time I thought to myself, what am I doing? Kind of person am I? What am I involved with? That was kind of my first time with that. Uh, then there were more and more and more mass murders and other political violence. And then meeting all those people, doing the recruiting as a Stormfront mod. And over the years, I just kind of got more and more fed up with white nationalists. Eventually, a man named David Lenio decided to come to Montana and be a part of the PLE. Well,
What's
I
the
didn't
PLE?
recruit him. Pioneer Little Europe, the organization well, not organization, it wasn't an organization, but it was the group that I was recruiting for. That
Okay,
was led by April Gady. Um, Sorry, Cat.
that's okay.
Uh, and he came to the area to be a part of our little community. And the way what a PLE is it's sort of a concept, the ethno state concept. You move to a particular area, you start you bring in a lot of other white nationalists, you start politically kind of taking over the area and putting people in office that are kind of like you politically, and that's kind of what the PLA concept is. And he came to be a part of that. He then at some point decided to go onto Twitter and threaten to shoot kids.
Oh,
He, I guess, went by a school one time and saw all the kids playing in the backyard. Went on Twitter and said, I'm tired of the government taking all of our, keeping us poor, and I want to shoot those kids because of it. Which, first of all, his father is like one of the wealthiest lawyers in Grand Rapids, so he skied every day, snowboarded every day, something I definitely couldn't do. But he had money, and he was still felt he was poor enough that he wanted to shoot kids for it. He also threatened to shoot the kids of Jonathan Hudson, who at the time was the communication director of the Brady campaign. And John hunted him down, and he was eventually arrested. And that was kind of my last
can I
straw.
just stop you right there for a second? What's the Brady
Sure.
campaign for those who don't know?
Brady campaign. I mean, I'm not exactly an expert on it, but it's anti-gun violence
Okay,
and stuff like that. Brady was. I mean,
that was
this was
the Brady bill, right? During the Clinton years,
the
wasn't it,
Brady
when
bill.
they banned assault weapons or something?
Yes, yep, that the
Yeah.
Brady bill.
Okay.
And he hunted him down, found him, and I by this point I had found out about it, and I was raging on Stormfront. I was just constantly going after people that were supporting it, and Jonathan ended up messaging me out of the blue and wanted to meet up. Again, somebody who worked against guns was meeting somebody that he knew had guns, as his wife warned him. And I said, sure, I'm always happy to meet up. It's not like I've never, had friendly, spats with Antifa before.
Yeah.
And so I did, and basically, became friends with his. I'm friends with him to this day. and that was kind of my out. Was I got sick of the political violence of the right.
I have someone that wants to ask you if the question is how do these various networks communicate with each other, these right wing networks, and how do they form a cohesive community? And then he wanted to just qualify that by saying, apart from the online stuff, like, is there a way that that these groups communicate with each other, kind of incognito, so that they don't get caught or they don't get ensnared in some sort of entrapment or whatever?
What I can say is I've been out of the movement now since 2016. So obviously the internet and how things have gone have progressed since then. That was even I left like just before Trump became president. So things have
Wow.
escalated quite a bit since then. But back when I was involved in the movement, there wasn't really anything cohesive. I mean,
Hmm.
there really isn't anything cohesive now. When you have a community that's built on nothing but fear and hate and insecurity, there's not going to ever be much insecurity. I'm a heathen. I'm not a Christian, and there were a lot of white nationalists, obviously, that are Christian. In fact, the tradcasts seem to dominate these days. Uh, so there was always back and forth against between me and them, the Christian ones, and you know it was always a group of people that was holding together by a piece of yarn wrapped around them. So if if let's say any group had gotten their ethno state, back then, or probably even now, that ethnostate would probably fall apart into infighting almost immediately. Because once you get that taste of, oh, I'm gonna be free now, and then you notice that, oh, that person may have been on my side, but he's different than me, so I'm gonna fight him now, and then
Yeah.
it just goes on and on and on and on. And so I don't think there, even now, I don't think there's anything really cohesive about right-wing extremism or extremism in general. It's just it is what it is.
Sometimes it makes me feel like the right wing extremism, like the Proud Boys stuff, the shit that happens on January 6th or in Charlottesville, is not intentionally. I don't think that it's this strategic, but it serves as a distraction from the things that are actually more important, which is sort of the Christian network alliance of people and groups that do things like um, work tirelessly to get things like Roe v. Wade um, abolished, right? Like we keep on looking at the Proud Boys, we keep on looking at stuff like that, or at Stormfront or 8chan or whatever we're looking at, and we don't realize that there's this entire Christian network constantly working around the clock to get followers to keep pushing things like anti-gay stuff and anti-abortion stuff. And it's almost it, I mean it's an asset to those Christian organizations that these crazy right wingers exist, because then the Christian organizations can sort of operate under the radar. Am I correct about that, or
I
am I
I
kind
think
of?
you're pretty much correct. It as somebody that is known to be a bit of a loudmouth, I can definitely tell you that loudmouth clowns are the ones that get all the attention, and the ones that are not quite as loud tend to be, you know, get skate by. So I hopefully I wasn't a clown when I was involved, but I was definitely loud, and just like I'm loud now. I mean, you get someone like me, and you give me a mic, and even though I'm not the best speaker in the world, I can be pretty bullish, and uh, if you look at people like Nick Adams on Twitter, or Matt Walsh, they always think they're the alphas, and it's like, guys, you're just loud. That's all. You're loud.
Plus, if you have Nick Adams is he's such a clown. Like if you have to announce every other day that you're an alpha, you're probably not one, right?
No, no,
Like,
you're absolutely not one. And I'm not saying I'm an alpha either. I'm not. I don't. I'm non-binary, so I don't really subscribe to a gender. Even if I wanted to, I guess I am male, so I would be if I was an alpha male. But I'm not gonna ever say I'm alpha. You know, uh,
I think
and
KRS-One said, "Real bad boys move in silence," right? And
yeah,
that's and it's funny because anytime I've ever gotten a death threat, I realize that the person sending the threat is probably not someone I have to worry about. You know?
pretty much. Uh, I and that's one of the things that I've always hated is the people that resorted to death threats because they're just they're a clown show that's yeah like Andrew England. Andrew England has done a lot of these threats, and it's in reality the the dude is just an incel that you know nobody wants to be around. Even white nationalists don't want to be around him. So
Yeah.
most of these people that try to be alphas don't live up to even beta. They're omegas.
Tell me about your thoughts on the January 6th uprising, because I know that again, I think it was from that same article from the Tampa Bay Times, where you said, I guess you were watching it on TV and you or something, and you said, "Oh, I've had drinks with that guy. Oh, I've met that guy, or I know that guy from Stormfront and this and that." And you kind of like, did it help? It sort of helps cement your transformation by watching that.
I think you kind of blurred that and Unite the Right together because
Oh,
Unite
my
the
bad.
Right to Unite the Right was where I knew a lot of the people.
Okay.
Uh, I'm sure I knew many of the people at Jan 6th. If not personally, I knew a lot of them online. And of course, there were others that I knew from reputation, like Baked Alaska and stuff like that. But Unite the Right, I actually knew a lot of the people that were there. There was at least one former member of Pioneer Little Europe Kalispell that was there, Stan. Um, but but when it came to Jan 6th, when I was watching it, the only thing I could think was, yeah, this seems like where everything was heading, and I was still. I don't know if I should have been shocked, but I was still as shocked as a lot of people were. It's it's one thing expecting extremists to be extreme, but it's a completely different story when you see them invade the Capitol building. And I was sitting there with my aunt because she was nice enough to kind of allow me to stay here when I came down for school. Uh, uh, and I was sitting there watching with my aunt, and it's just like was mind-blowingly. It's like why? And then of course I saw the Oath Keepers doing their thing, and I was an Oath Keeper. I never went out and did anything with them or anything like that, but I was actually a member. And it you know I it was definitely something that I didn't necessarily see coming, but probably should have.
Um, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second and ask you a question that is intentionally hyperbolic, but I think you'll understand the point when I ask you. Why should we believe you that you have changed your ways?
I will say that I don't think anybody should necessarily believe me. They should, if they want to see, they could just see the things that I do and stuff like that. I don't believe anybody should be believed ever. There are plenty of people that have stated that they've left the movement who didn't. And you know, an example of that, Jeff Shope, who used to lead the NSM. Uh, all I got is the things that I do, the things that I say, and people are definitely able to judge for themselves. Um, I try to be as much of an open book as possible. If people ask me things, I will honestly tell people almost anything. The only time I will ever tell people I can't answer that is if I don't know the answer. Uh, so
Is
it's
it
one of
is
those
it is it
things.
is it when you're in that sort of transition? Are there certain things that you might do where you don't necessarily like believe that you are a person that would do that, but you do it because you want to sort of not pull the wool over anyone's eyes, but you just want to make sure that everyone understands that you're not like you used to be. I'm thinking of things like, I'm not making fun of you, I swear to God. It's just that something that I would never personally do because of a bunch of reasons, but putting pronouns in your bio. Like I would imagine that the old you would be like making fun of that. And does the new you now go, no, that is a very good way to express who you are? Or are you like, you know what, I'm going to do this as a signal so that people know I'm not like that?
I'm non-binary, so I put it in there so people know they can use. I mean, technically speaking, people can use whatever pronouns for me, and I wouldn't really care. It's not like I've never called anybody and had somebody say, "Well, thank you, ma'am."
Right.
It's like whatever. Uh, but I put it in there because I am non-binary, so my pronouns are he, they, primarily he, but I accept they, and it's a good policy. When it comes to work, a lot of places that you work now. I was working for Providence Hospital System up in Everett, Washington, recently, and they a lot of people there they put their pronouns in their work emails and stuff like that. It's just part of what people do these days. Now I'm not saying everybody has to do it, but
I get a little put off when people ask me what my pronouns are.
you
I'm
know
just, like, and again, this is one of those issues where it's like someone hears me say that, they probably make a whole bunch of assumptions about what I really think, and I'm just really like, I just, I don't really care what anyone's pronouns are. And it's not because I don't care about them or their identities or whatever. I have an issue with trying to remember to call one person they, because I don't like when you say you're non-binary. We could have like a 3 hour discussion on it because I don't really I sometimes I describe it as the emotional avatars of people are. We're now building rights around emotional avatars, and that isn't even a like a. I'm not trying to be offensive. I don't really see the purpose of the pronoun thing. And also
uh,
I don't recognize a whole bunch of stuff like Z and Zer. Like I just simply do not recognize the existence of those because I don't
uh,
think that they're real.
yeah.
Right.
I
And
also
so
understand that somebody like me saying that I'm non-binary is probably also confuses people a lot too. I mean, because I'm obviously masculine, so it's obviously it's something. The way I look at it is, if somebody offers you their pronouns, and you give a decent enough effort to remember what their pronouns are and say it, they're generally not going to have too many issues if you slip up. If you're somebody that your first reaction is, I don't care what your pronouns are, I'm just going to call you whatever I want to call you, that's, I mean, just
well,
like
mine's
any
a
person.
slightly different from that. What I would say is that if you told me that your pronouns were Z and Zer, I would just call you Scott. I would just
Another
avoid
option.
all pronouns
Yeah,
altogether, and I would be
that's
like, "Where's
nothing wrong with
Scott?
that.
Scott is over there." Like
Nothing wrong with that. And if somebody says that their pronouns are Z and Zer, yeah, avoiding pronouns is an easy way to deal with it. I mean, you don't have to tell them you're avoiding pronouns. Just avoid the pronouns. You don't even have to comment about it. If somebody's pronouns are they, and you accidentally slip up and say he, and it's somebody that's obviously leans a little bit masculine. I don't think they're going to pitch too many fits about it. I think what the problem ends up being is when you have some of these people who, when they just see pronouns and you know and they just get all hysterical. Oh my gosh, there's pronouns. It's like, yeah, it's just something that a lot of people do now because it's considered, it's a social type of thing. When you're like in the work emails I was mentioning, if you aren't too necessarily too sure, uh, you know, I don't necessarily know what everybody is considering their pronouns at work, that I work with. Uh, so it's good for them to tell me. Now, that's because these days there is a lot more trans people, and there is a lot more, people that are gender fluid, non-binary. I'm agender, so for me, it's I just don't subscribe with gender. I don't care about gender. You know, if somebody wants to call me a man these days, I don't really care either. If somebody wants to call me whatever. I don't really care either. But it sometimes it pays to just try to try to do something to not cause conflict, even if it might annoy you a little bit. Um, but
I don't think I've ever
I
confronted anyone about their
yeah.
pronouns though. Like that's a, like and talking about it in an open forum like this is not something I actually do very often. I most of the time it's because people don't want to talk about it. They're like, "Oh, James, here we go again on the gender stuff." I just have um, I have a need for evidence. And I don't know how, like I was talking to Morgane Ogre once, and she's Auger, sorry, Morgane, I think Morgane Auger. Anyways, she's a trans activist. She's a trans woman. She's a trans activist from Vancouver, and we were talking about the idea that there are like dozens and dozens of genders, and that topic really frustrates me because, and I kind of explained it to her like this. I was like, can we get an app that tells us when a gender has been discovered and who discovered it and how they discovered it? Because I want to know where we are coming up with the evidence that these dozens of genders exist.
Well, let me
And
put
she
it
didn't
this
have an
way.
answer for me. And it wasn't because I was trying to tell her that people aren't individuals and they're not how they say they are. I'm willing to accept
You get that.
everybody for what they say that they are, but I need to understand that it's grounded in something tangible. Like I
Yeah, I
want to
can
know
definitely
where these
tell you
genders
it
come
is.
from and who names them. And no one can
Uh,
answer that question for me.
so gender is so. All right. Biological sex would obviously be biology. Gender is actually something that comes in human development. Yeah. Again, my degree is in public health, but when I actually went back to when I went back to school, human development was actually one of the things I was going for. So I started with early childhood development. Uh, I kind of I didn't continue down that path mainly because first off, I didn't want to deal with kids. But
At least you
you
didn't want
know,
to shoot them. That's good.
yeah, I mean, it was already weird enough that with the one class I had where I had to go sit behind a screen and watch a bunch of kids out there playing and write down everything they're doing and analyze it, and yeah, it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
But that's what teachers in a lot of places have to go through. And one of the things that they teach about human development is gender is something that happens with human development. Gender roles are a human development issue, and some other cultures obviously have other genders also. So that's where these things are coming in. So the best way to keep up with that sort of thing is to look at human development related websites. Um, we've definitely taken this conversation way off track, but
Oh, that's
yeah,
yeah. Listen, it's a way that is like okay but I mean it's interesting. I'll get off this in a second. I'm actually going to let
yeah,
you go in the next 5 minutes
it's
or
all
so.
good.
But we have this is one of my favorite audience members, the Saucy Sea Witch. Two genders is a patriarchy concept. Genders were not really a thing in other cultures. Indigenous had many spectrums, same as paganism. Their history was erased by the church. Now, I disagree completely with like the first two sentences almost entirely, right? And it's not because of any nefarious reason. I don't think that gender is a social construct. I think that society is a construct that developed because of genders. I think that I have a boy and a girl. Okay. I feel like this idea that kids are really a blank slate and society just thrusts upon them what they're supposed to be for male or female. I think that's bullshit. I think that organically, I think that girls are and boys are born, and if the girl is okay, I live in the sticks. My daughter has been raised in the sticks. We don't have cable, so she doesn't watch television commercials. I do not throw anything at her that's like girls need to like pink and like princesses. No, no, I never do that. But she organically and naturally just gravitated towards that. And in my belief, it's because a biological female is more likely to exhibit interests that are aligned with what we would call female gender. I don't think that society thrusted anything upon her. I think it happened naturally and organically. Same thing with my son. My son is more of a guy's guy than I am. My son has more of a macho side to him than I will ever have. He is like a guy through and through. He likes trucks. He likes he likes to play fight. He likes to like horse around. And I don't think that society did that to him. I think that he was born a biological male and was naturally inclined because of his sex to follow a path that was sort of aligned with what his biology was. Saying that makes people crazy these days. Like
Now,
they're like they want to tell me that no, these two children that you have that I've never met, James, they only are interested in that because of what society did to them, not because they're naturally that way. And I'm just like, that's not true.
Now, what if it wasn't society though? And what if it was the influence from, like you said, you didn't buy them any particular toys or anything, they chose it. But what if they were influenced not only by you, but they were influenced by media, they were influenced by their friends, they were influenced by other families, other members of the family, and so they're raised in this binary household. They're gonna end up a binary. Uh, so, if you ever notice that a lot of people that or a lot of kids that come out as non-binary or trans, a lot of them come from households where maybe the members of the family or the people that they play with, the kids that they play with, they're also uh, trans or non-binary or something like that. Human development, your development comes from not just society, but also your community. If you go to church, your church influences you. If you go to a school, your school influences you. Your classmates influence you. Your teachers influence you. Uh, Everybody influences you. So yes, if so, where the society comes in is all of those teachers and everything like that are part of the society. That's the take I would probably go with,
Mhm.
rather than just society does it, because society is what we make it. Also, it's a social construct also. But human development is something that has been taught for a long time. This teaching about the development of gender identity actually has been existed for a while.
Okay. Okay. Well, I like having the good faith discussion. As someone said in the comments, it is a good faith discussion. I am not sitting here trying to make controversy. But listen, I like the way the conversation evolved. I really think you're interesting. You're a lot better at speaking than you give yourself credit for.
Thank you.
So I just want to throw that out there. And you can come back anytime. I really appreciate your time. Scott Ernest, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Blackballed. I
It
appreciate
was my pleasure. It was nice meeting you. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope your kids are doing good too.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, Scott Ernest, thank you very much, buddy. I have a little message for Paul Atkinson. Are you going to be broadcasting, Paul, on this stream? Because I have a double header tonight at 9, and I didn't see anyone on the schedule. So we might have to talk about that. Or if you have a different stream that you can broadcast on, that would be awesome. But we might need to talk. Because at 9 o'clock, the second half of the Blackballed doubleheader is the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church had been embroiled in a legal case in Manitoba for the last 2 years, where they didn't want their identities known to the public. They essentially wanted a publication ban on the fact that the two schools that the Plymouth Brethren have in Manitoba had complained to the Human Rights Museum, which is the irony of all ironies, that they wanted the Human Rights Museum, when their school kids came in to look around, to cover up anything inside that museum that had anything to do with gay rights or LGBT rights, which obviously is fucking stupid and homophobic. And for 2 years, they have been fighting so that to make sure that the public didn't know what the courage of their convictions were, which is awesome. And the lawyer for these two schools, former Stephen Harper attorney and former general counsel to the Conservative Party of Canada, Gerald Shapour. So this was a impromptu doubleheader, and the 9 o'clock tonight, Richard Marsh, Carmen Drever, who, if in case you don't remember, is the grandchild of the former exalted high almighty leader of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, a guy named John Symington, or Jim Symington, John Symington, I can't remember, Symington. And she'll be on the show with Richard Marsh and Cheryl Hope. And we are going to talk about how, and this is breaking news, this just broke today. This organization is just honestly one of the most hateful organizations ever. they would definitely have members that are on Stormfront. As my guest tonight, Scott Ernest, used to be the moderator of. By the way, Scott Ernest, I believe him. That guy seems solid. I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but his personality seemed very authentic. He does legitimately seem earnest, if you will, about his transformation from white nationalist to a person that is no longer practicing that kind of vitriolic hatred. And so I really appreciate him coming on. I will totally have him back. And I'm gonna brand this last segment eventually, but I want to do sort of a Columbo thing with my shows now, and I guess I'll call it something like just one more thing. And so I'm going to say that now. Just one more thing. There was a guest that was supposed to be on the show yesterday night at 9 p.m. She is what I would consider a brilliant artist. She has done movie posters and official comic book covers for some of the biggest movies and comic books on the planet. Her name is Zizhu, and she, after accepting my invitation to come on Blackballed, she then declined yesterday, a few hours, I guess it was like 10 hours or whatever before the show. And we had a little bit of a back and forth. She blocked me on Twitter. Nothing happened. We never had an argument or anything like that. But she blocked me because she, I guess, looked at my Spotify and saw Megan Murphy's name on the list of one of my past guests, and decided to use that as a springboard to block me and to not honor the commitment that she had made to come on the show. And I just want to let her know and everybody else know that I don't have any personal animosity towards you, despite disagreeing with the reason why you didn't come on the show. Obviously, I disagree with the idea of blocking a person that you never even had an argument with. While I do find it reactionary and the implication that my show, just by existing or by interviewing Megan Murphy, that my show somehow harms people, I categorically reject out of hand. But I just wanted to say, just to sort of like bookend, my very small relationship with this person, that I still believe that she's a brilliant artist. And while I fundamentally disagree with her canceling and the reasons behind canceling, you cannot argue with this. Chosen by Keanu Reeves himself, and to be part of the official artwork of John Wick 4, which comes out in March of 2024. And why am I doing this? Why am I saying any of this? I think it's really important for me to remain principled to the idea that I will talk to anyone, without having to be saddled with the idea that I co-sign their views or endorse their views. And despite disagreeing with Zizhu's decision to not come on the show, I cannot, in good conscience, trash this person. I disagree with her, and that's it. I don't have any personal animosity toward her, and I still think she's a brilliant artist. If she decided that she wanted to come back, I wouldn't do that thing where I stiffen my upper lip and be like, no, you canceled it, now you can't come back. No, I'd have her back. Will I ask her to come back? No, I won't. She disinvited herself, and that was her decision. But my door is always open for anybody that wants to talk to me, that wants to get me to clarify what my views are, or even explain why I would interview Megan Murphy or anybody else. I have to maintain that. There was a time where that cancellation would have set me off, and I would have been very angry about it. But I prefer now to take a look at it as more of a pragmatic view, and just say to myself, since I cannot deny the reason that I wanted her on the show to begin with had everything to do with her artwork and nothing to do with her as a person because I didn't know her, that I will maintain that principle of wanting to talk to a brilliant artist, despite the fact that she canceled her appearance on this show. So Ziju, if you are listening, maybe I'll make a clip of this and send it to you just to let you know there are no hard feelings. We just have an impasse that I don't think I'm going to be coming around on your side of that argument anytime in the future. But I just want to stress that it is important for me to make sure that my principles are held strong. I would interview anyone that I find compelling, and it remains that way. And so we will see you next time, 9 p.m. in about 1 hour on Blackballed. Thank you for joining us.
Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed.